Show for you here on BBC Wiltshire. Ben with you until 9. It's the 2017. We turn our attention to Westbury. There are fresh worries there that controversial plans for a bypass around the town aren't dead, but only dormant. You might remember that 4 years ago, Wiltshire Council's plans for a relief road were rejected by the government after a public inquiry. Anti-bypass campaigners thought that was that, thank you very much. But they're now alarmed that a Westbury bypass appears in the authority's core strategy for future development. Some will even be protesting this morning. BBC Wiltshire's Jess Davis is in our radio car on White Horse Hill this morning. Jess.
Yeah, morning, Ben. I'm standing really close to the Iron Age hill fort of Bratton Camp, and it's perched high above Salisbury Plain. And this morning I've watched a herd of sheep walk along that skyline, and this is a very, very open viewpoint. I've already seen lots of dog walkers on a morning ramble. Just below me in the valley is the famous White Horse down to the right, thought to have been cut into the chalk hillside at least 500 years ago to celebrate a victory by King Alfred. And away in the distance to the north is Melksham and Chippenham, although unfortunately the mist has come down this morning, so you can't see very far. But Westbury, I know, is to the left and down below me, and at present traffic on the busy A350 cuts straight through the town. If a bypass were ever to be built, it would skirt around the eastern side just below the hill here. Now, as you mentioned, the government rejected the idea back in 2009, but details and a map showing the proposed route dotted out in red have now appeared in Wiltshire Council's core strategy for future development for the next 13 years. And that's worried several people like Alex Prowse here, who's one of a number of people planning a protest in a few hours' time. So, Alex, what does this landscape mean to you? Why is it so special?
Well, first of all, this Wellhead and White Horse landscape is the most beautiful landscape, as far as I'm concerned, in the UK. It's internationally known. People from all over the world come to visit this site. And today we're going to have a painting just to take the scales from the eyes of Wiltshire Council.
And how nervous are you that, this landscape that's so important to you might be still at risk?
I am pretty certain that it is at risk. We have attended many of the area board meetings, and to hear our chairman 2 weeks ago say that he is now reconsidering his attitude towards the AONB, which he supported, in fact he launched 2 years ago.
And that's, of course, the area of outstanding natural beauty. And you're, of course, a painter. So what are you planning to do today, Alex?
OK, I'm just going to follow up with what happened at the public inquiry. The two inspectors took in my paintings and they took them in as evidence. And I gave a montage of what it would be like if they put a motorway through or a bypass through the valley. The Wiltshire Council did not have perspectives. I did have perspectives, and the inspectors called on those as evidence.
So you basically created your artist's impression of what would happen, and you've got those in front of us. So you've basically painted the landscape as it is, and then also painted it with the bypass through. So what do you hope to do today as a follow-on?
OK, as a follow-on, we've got a group of Westbury artists that come here. We'll be coming here today, and we will paint this morning, paint the landscape, and hopefully attract people to see how beautiful the landscape is.
And how do you think that's going to help the campaign?
Well, I think it'll give it spirit.
OK, well, I've also got Roy Inwood with me, who's from the White Horse Alliance. And Roy, how would you like to see this landscape protected?
We're on the verge of having an AONB, area of outstanding natural beauty, but Wiltshire Council seem to be dragging their heels. Natural England have sort of agreed to it, and the area board of Westbury have agreed to it.
Roy, in terms of a bypass, though, I mean, you must have driven through Westbury hundreds of times, and it is pretty congested.
No, not really. I spent time taking pictures of traffic along there, and it's not that bad, to be honest. But if the people of Westbury want a bypass, the western route is more sensible.
Okay, well, Alex Praz and Roy Inwood, thank you very much. And Wiltshire Council have told us that the Westbury bypass has to be in their core strategy purely for information to actually show previous intent. And it says it will review the policy in future in consultation with local people. And we will find out more about what that'll mean when we speak to Wiltshire Council later in the programme.
Covered it over the years. A group of protesters are at the famous White Horse Hill near Westbury this morning over fears that that controversial bypass for the town could still go ahead. 4 years ago, Wiltshire Council's plans for a bypass around the eastern side of Westbury were rejected by the government after a public inquiry. Well, anti-bypass campaigners thought that was that. But they now expressed alarm that details and a map of the proposed route appear in the council's core strategy for any future development over the next 13 years. Russell Hawker is the independent councillor for Westbury West on Wiltshire Council and with us. Good morning.
Very good morning to you.
What is your take on this latest agitation, shall we say?
It's quite a fuss about a proposal that's been around for a long time. To be honest, I don't think many people realise that the proposal for a bypass, which was previously in what was called the structure plan for Wiltshire and the West Wiltshire District Plan, would continue over into the core strategy that's being produced by Wiltshire Council at the moment. So when the planning application for the bypass was rejected back in 2009, I think a lot of anti-bypass protesters were rejoicing. They were thinking that the project was over, finished, dead, never to arise again. So when they realised that the bypass route was staying in the plans for Wiltshire, they must have realised that there was still a chance that the bypass would reappear. I think what needs to be pointed out is that the core strategy does not actually propose to build the bypass. There's no project for that at the moment because there's no money. But nevertheless, anti-bypass protesters are creating a stir, saying that the route for the bypass should not even be in the plan.
Creating a stir or just voicing their opinion, it's perfectly okay not to want this, isn't it?
Oh, of course.
Do you think that painting pictures like they'll be doing today will change things significantly? They want to show everybody just how beautiful a part of the county this is.
I think they're just keeping the story alive for the moment in the sense that there probably isn't much they can do. The proposal is in the core strategy. It's been to the planning inspector. I know that he's announced that there's another consultation coming up with some proposed changes. I don't know what those changes are to the core strategy. I'm hoping there's nothing in Westbury. But the details will be released soon when it all goes live on the website.
Why is it, in your mind, you're convinced that Westbury does need a bypass? We were hearing earlier people saying, the traffic's not that bad, actually.
It can get quite bad. Peak traffic is during the summer. Westbury does suffer blight from the traffic congestion, noise, and queues and so on. We've got the A350 going right through the town, right through the middle of the town, in fact, right next to where the shops are. And one of the consequences is younger and older people can have quite a bit of difficulty crossing the road from one side of the town to the other.
Do you think this idea is dead or dormant? I mean, are you losing sleep that this is still potentially on the table? Or not, as the case may be?
Right. I don't lose any sleep over it at all, in the sense that when the public inquiry led to a recommendation for refusal, and then the Secretary of State did refuse the planning application, it was clear that, at least for some years, the bypass project would be dead, not least because we were heading into a recession, and it was quite obvious the money won't be available. So, quite honestly, I don't expect the bypass to be built for at least 10 years. Nevertheless, I remain optimistic that we will get one, in the sense that clearly Wiltshire Council recognised the need for one. They've kept the route, they've saved the route in the core strategy, meaning that no other development should occur to prejudice that route. Of course, that doesn't mean they will necessarily use the route. I would have thought it's quite obvious that should the money become available, one way or the other, highways engineers and consultants will re-look at the routes to try and justify whatever the new project proposed route is. And that might be the eastern route, should they deem that to be suitable then. But it could be another route, I don't know.
Russell Hawker, still in the dark to some degree. The independent councillor for Westbury West. BBC Wiltshire's Dan O'Brien can tell us why.
As far as most people were aware, the idea of a Westbury bypass has been dead in the water for years. Turns out, though, technically at least, it's not quite as dead as they thought. Here's why. All councils have to plan what will happen to their area in the future. They'll need to know where houses will be built, where jobs will be needed, where infrastructure needs to be improved. That plan for the next 2 decades is known as the Core Strategy. Wiltshire Council spent the last couple of years putting its version together, and now it's waiting to be signed off by a government inspector. But as part of that document, the council has to include plans which already exist, even if in reality they're probably not going to happen. That's where the Westbury bypass comes in. It was rejected by a government inspector in 2009, but it's never been officially dropped as a policy, and for that reason had to be included in the strategy. It doesn't mean that it'll be revived anytime soon, though, not least because there's no money to build one. But it does mean that the option is still technically on the table. That's now come to the attention of today's protesters, a group of local artists who want Wiltshire Council to commit to dropping the idea altogether.
That's Dan O'Brien. Well, let's speak now to Conservative councillor Fleur de Rais-Philippe, who's coordinated the core strategy document at the very heart of this. Good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
Can you safely and say clearly that once and for all, whether you ever intend to build this bypass or not?
No, I can't. What will happen now is when the core strategy is adopted, which hopefully will be towards the end of this year, we will then review all what are called the saved policies. There are about 5 of them. Policies that were in the old district plans and now require review, and that the Westbury bypass, the Eastern Westbury bypass, is one of those.
And so you're going to review. What does a review entail?
That means looking at everything from the ground up, the evidence for the bypass, the evidence against the bypass, going into a great deal of local consultation and seeing what comes out at the end.
Do you want it?
I think that 2 things. I think, A, that the people who live in the centre of Westbury definitely need some relief from the traffic. The through traffic in Westbury is pretty horrendous. And the other thing is that I think that the A350 as a route is extremely important to the economy and the economic development of the whole of Wiltshire, particularly the western side.
So dead or dormant, would you use the term?
I think for the foreseeable future, it is extremely unlikely that there will be money available to do it. Now, what will come out of any review of that policy, I really am not able to say. But that will be done. All saved policies will be reviewed, we've always said, and it says in the document, as soon as the core strategy is actually adopted.
Fleur de Rais-Philippe, thank you, Conservative councillor, coordinating the core strategy, which is at the very heart of this. It's the nub, the epicentre. 8:20 is the time.